Hello, all the light in the world to you. May peace, clarity, and good direction be with you right now. Today we're going to break down something that goes beyond a simple weekly forecast. This is not just about how your week will feel. It's about understanding what is starting to shift, both in your life and in the world around you. This week, from April 20 to April 26th, carries something very specific. At first glance, it may look like a normal sequence of days. But when you start to look closer, you realize that it's not just about routine, there's a transition happening. And when certain transitions begin, they don't just affect one day, they start processes. Some of those processes unfold quickly, others take months, and some change entire cycles. So instead of looking at this week as just another week, the goal here is different. The goal is to understand what kind of energy each day brings, how that affects your decisions, and where you should act or hold back. Because one of the biggest mistakes people make is reacting the same way every day. Not every day is meant for action. Not every day is meant for decision. Not every day is meant for exposure. And when you start aligning your behavior with timing, things become more efficient. Let's start with Monday. Monday begins under a very specific dynamic. There is a strong mental activation. This is the kind of day where your mind doesn't slow down. Ideas come faster. Thoughts connect quickly. You start thinking about things you've been postponing. It's not a quiet day. It's an active one. But here's where most people misunderstand this kind of moment. They think, if I have ideas, I should act immediately. That's not always true, because Monday is not just about ideas. It's about turning ideas into structured action. This is a day where you can take something that was only a plan and move it into reality. Not in a chaotic way, not impulsively, but with direction. This is what makes this day powerful. It's not just inspiration, it's execution with awareness. So anything that involves starting something, opening a project, initiating a conversation, taking a first step fits very well here. But there is also something else happening at the same time. There is a natural restraint, which means even though there is movement, there is also a filter. And that filter is important because it prevents you from acting based only on excitement. It forces you to consider, does this make sense in practice? So Monday becomes a day where ideas are tested against reality. And this is what separates it from random motivation. It's not about doing everything. It's about doing the right first step. Now, when we move into Tuesday, everything shifts. The pace changes. The focus changes. Tuesday is not about thinking. It's about feeling. This is where many people struggle because they try to maintain the same rhythm from Monday. But the environment is different. Tuesday pulls you inward. It's more connected to comfort, personal space, emotional state. This is the kind of day where staying at home feels more natural, where being around familiar people feels better. And if you try to force productivity in the same way as Monday, you will feel resistance, not because something is wrong, but because the focus is different. This is a day to slow down, to reorganize internally, to reconnect with what feels stable. And this continues into Wednesday. Wednesday doesn't introduce strong external changes. It maintains the same tone, which means trying to push too hard during these 2 days usually creates unnecessary effort. Instead, using this time to organize your space, reconnect with people you trust, reset your internal state brings better results. Now, up to this point, everything seems manageable. A strong start, wrong. A slower adjustment, a period of internal alignment. But starting Thursday, the tone changes again. And this is where the week begins to show its real impact. Because Thursday is not just another shift. It introduces something that tends to affect relationships directly. And when relationships are affected, everything else around them moves too. This is where decisions start to appear, where limits start to be tested, where certain dynamics can no longer continue the same way. Starting Thursday, the week stops being just about a rhythm and starts becoming about decisions. Up until now, you had a strong beginning, a moment to slow down, a period to reorganize. But Thursday introduces something different. It brings focus to relationships, not only romantic relationships, but any type of connection, partnerships, friendships, work dynamics. And here's the key point. This is not about creating problems. It's about revealing what is already unstable. That's a very important difference because many people, when something breaks, think that the moment caused it, but in reality, the moment just exposed it. Thursday carries a strong tendency towards clarity. Not necessarily comfortable clarity, but direct clarity. This is when people start noticing what no longer works, what feels limiting, what doesn't match anymore. And once that becomes visible, it becomes harder to ignore. That's why this kind of day often brings difficult conversations, decisions that were postponed, situations that reach a limit, and in some cases, endings. Now, here's where most people react the wrong way. They try to hold everything together. They try to fix immediately. They try to avoid discomfort. But that's not always the best move, because when something reaches a breaking point, forcing it to continue the same way only delays the inevitable. This doesn't mean you should end everything. It means you should look clearly at what is happening. Ask yourself, is this connection adding or limiting? Is there balance here or pressure? Is this sustainable long term? Because Thursday brings a strong push towards self-priority, not in an exaggerated or selfish way, but in a necessary way. It becomes harder to ignore your own needs. And this is where a lot of people feel uncomfortable because they are used to adapting, used to adjusting, used to tolerating. But now the situation demands a position, and that changes everything. Friday continues in the same direction, but with more movement. If Thursday reveals, Friday reinforces. You may notice people becoming more direct, decisions becoming clearer, boundaries becoming more defined, and something else happens here. There is a stronger need for freedom. Freedom in how you express yourself, freedom in how you relate, freedom in how you move. And when a relationship restricts that, tension increases. This is why this period can feel intense for some people, not because something new is being created, but because something that was already there is no longer being ignored. Now, there's an important point here. Not every relationship is affected the same way. If a relationship is balanced, respectful, supportive, it doesn't break. In fact, it can even improve because honesty strengthens what is already solid. But if a relationship is limiting, unbalanced, based on pressure, then yes, this is where it starts to crack. And that's not necessarily negative because sometimes maintaining something that no longer works is more damaging than ending it. This is the part most people avoid. They focus on the discomfort of change instead of the cost of staying the same. Now, all of this already makes the week significant, but what comes next is on a completely different level because Saturday is not just about personal life. It marks something much bigger, a shift that goes beyond individual situations and starts affecting how things work on a larger scale. Saturday is not just another day in this week, it's the turning point. Up to this moment, everything we talked about affects your routine, your decisions, your relationships. But Saturday goes beyond that. It marks the beginning of a shift that doesn't last a day or a week. It starts a cycle that unfolds over the next 7 years. And this is where you need to pay attention because most people only react to change when it becomes obvious. But by then, they're already behind. Saturday introduces a change in how things move, not just in your life, but in how the world itself operates. And the first place this shows up is in how we interact. Think about how you communicate today. Messages, voice, video, social platforms. Now imagine that changing faster than expected. Not gradually, not slowly, but in a way that forces adaptation. Because that's how this type of shift works. It doesn't ask if you're ready, it just happens. Over the next years, you'll notice something very clear. The way people connect, exchange information, and respond to each other will not remain the same. New tools will appear, new systems will replace old ones, new forms of communication will become normal, and the people who adapt quickly move ahead, while those who resist feel stuck. This is not about prediction. It's about recognizing patterns. Every time a major shift like this happens, you see the same structure. Old systems start losing relevance. New ones rise quickly. At first, they seem strange. Then they become useful. And eventually, they become standard. You've already seen this before. Think about how fast things changed with digital payments, remote work, online communication. What seemed optional became essential. And now the same type of acceleration is starting again. But this time, it goes deeper. It's not just about tools. It's about how you think, learn, and interact. Another area that will be affected is movement. How people move, how things are transported, how distance is handled. This doesn't mean instant transformation overnight, but it does mean that over time, you will start noticing changes that didn't exist before. Faster systems, different structures, more integration between technology and daily life. And this brings another important point, learning. The way people learn is also changing. Traditional models don't disappear immediately, but they start evolving. Access becomes faster, information becomes more available, and the value shifts from having information to knowing how to use it, which means adapting becomes more important than memorizing. Understanding becomes more important than repeating. And this is where many people struggle because change creates discomfort. People want stability, predictability, control, but this kind of shift doesn't offer that. It requires flexibility, not reacting with resistance, but adjusting in real time. And this applies to everything: how you work, how you communicate, how you position yourself. Now, there's something very practical you can do starting Saturday. Instead of trying to predict everything, observe. Look at how things are right now. Pay attention to how you communicate, how you move, how you interact with technology. Write it down if you need to, because over time you will see the difference. And when you compare, then you will understand how much has changed. Not because someone told you, but because you experienced it. This gives you awareness, and awareness gives you advantage. Because while most people only notice change when it becomes unavoidable, you will see it forming, and that changes how you respond. Now, there's still one last part to understand, because even with all this movement, there is a detail at the end of the week that most people ignore, but it can create unnecessary problems if you don't pay attention. The detail most people ignore, and why it can create problems. Fast. After everything that builds up during the week, after the pressure, the decisions, the shifts, Sunday brings something different. It's not about big changes. It's not about major events. It's about control. More specifically, control over what you say. Because at the end of a week like this, most people feel the need to release something. They want to talk. They want to explain. They want to share what they've been thinking. And that's where mistakes happen. Sunday carries a tendency toward overcommunication, not because people want to create problems, but because they don't notice how much they are exposing. You might feel like explaining your plans, sharing ideas too early, talking about things that are not fully developed yet, and in many cases, that weakens the situation. Because not everything benefits from being shared too soon. Some things need time. Some ideas need structure before exposure. Some plans need silence before action. When you speak too early, you lose control of the process. Not always in an obvious way. Sometimes it's subtle. A comment from someone else influences your decision. A reaction changes your perspective. A doubt gets introduced where there was clarity. And suddenly, something that was strong that starts to lose direction. This is why Sunday is not about silence, but about selective communication. You don't need to hide everything, but you do need to choose what is worth sharing and what is not. Another point here is attention. After a week with movement and change, your mental state is not neutral. You might feel more reactive, more open, more willing to express, and that combination can lead to unnecessary exposure. So instead of reacting immediately, pause. Think before responding. Not in an overthinking way, but in a controlled way. Ask yourself, does this need to be said now? Does this add something or complicate it? Is this the right moment or just the impulse to speak? This small filter prevents a lot of unnecessary situations. Another important detail is external influence. Not everyone around you wants the same outcome you want. And that's not about negativity. It's just reality. People have different interests, different perspectives, different intentions. So when you expose something early, you open space for interference, sometimes direct, sometimes indirect, and that can affect how things develop. So Sunday becomes a day where restraint creates advantage, not reacting to everything, not explaining everything, not sharing everything, just enough to keep things moving without unnecessary complications. Now, when you look at the entire week together, you can see the structure clearly. A strong start, a necessary slowdown, a moment of relationship tension, a major shift in direction, and a final need for control. Each part serves a purpose, and when you understand how they connect, you stop reacting randomly. You start positioning yourself. And this is where the difference appears, because most people go through the week without noticing any of this. They react day by day without understanding the pattern, and because of that, they repeat the same mistakes. But once you see the structure, you can move differently, and that changes the outcome. Now, there's one last thing to close this properly, because understanding all of this is useful, but applying it is what actually creates results. Now that you've seen the entire structure of this week, the most important question is not what is going to happen. It's what are you going to do with this? Because knowing the pattern without adjusting your behavior doesn't change anything. Most people go through moments like this without realizing what's actually happening. They act the same way every day. They respond the same way to every situation. They expose the same things at the wrong time. And because of that, they get inconsistent results. But once you understand the structure of a week like this, your position changes. You stop reacting randomly. You start choosing how to act. At the beginning of the week, you use the momentum. You don't wait. You take action on what already makes sense. You don't try to do everything, but you move what needs to move. In the middle of the week, you slow down. You don't force productivity when the focus is internal. You use that time to reset, to organize, to reconnect with stability. Then when relationships start to shift, you don't panic. You observe. You don't try to fix everything immediately. You don't force something to continue just because it existed before. You look at what is actually happening. And if something no longer makes sense, you allow the situation to show it. That alone avoids a lot of unnecessary pressure. When the bigger shift begins, you don't resist. You adapt. You pay attention to what is changing. You don't ignore it. You don't delay adjustment, because the faster you adapt, the easier the transition becomes. And at the end of the week, you control exposure. You don't say everything. You don't explain everything. You don't share everything too early. You keep direction. And that creates stability, even in a moment of change. This is the difference, not in what happens, but in how you respond to it. Because the same week can create completely different outcomes, depending on how someone positions themselves. Now, if you look at your own life, there is a high chance that you've already experienced something like this before. Moments where things started moving quickly. Situations became clearer. Relationships reached the limit and decisions had to be made. The difference now is that you can see it happening. And when you see it, you act differently. That's what creates advantage. Now, if this made sense to you and you want me to continue bringing this type of breakdown, clear, practical, without unnecessary complication, leave a comment with the kind of situation you are dealing with right now, because that helps guide what comes next. And if you know someone who keeps repeating the same type of situation without understanding why, this is something worth sharing. Because in many cases, people don't need more effort. They need clarity. And once they have it, they stop repeating the same patterns.